In the heart of an ancient African kingdom, there lived a powerful king, known and respected by all, with his 2 sons, the princes of the realm. The kingdom was vast, prosperous and filled with beauty, but it was the royal family that everyone admired most. The 2 princes were incredibly close. They had grown up together, playing in the palace gardens, learning to fight alongside one another, and sharing countless stories under the stars. The firstborn son, Prince Amani, was the ideal future king. He had everything a kingdom could wish for in a leader. He was strikingly handsome, intelligent, kind-hearted, and respected by all. The people adored him, the court trusted him, and his father had no doubt that Amani would one day make a great king. As the elder brother, Amani was destined to inherit the throne, and no one doubted that he would rule with wisdom and compassion. Then there was the second prince, Prince Jabari. Unlike his older brother, Jabari had never been the center of attention. He wasn't as handsome, nor as charming. And while he wasn't exactly disliked, he didn't have the same magnetic pull that Amani had. Jabari wasn't outgoing or popular. He preferred solitude, finding comfort in writing songs and playing music rather than socializing at court. He was often left in the shadows, overlooked by both nobles and common folk alike. When princesses from neighboring kingdoms came to visit, they all came for Amani, hoping to win the heart of the future king. No one ever asked about Jabari, and in the silence of his loneliness, his heart ached. Every time there was a celebration or a parade of princesses hoping to be Amani's bride, Jabari would sneak away to the woods. There, with his instrument in hand, he'd pour out his soul in the form of songs. This was the only place he felt at peace, far from the expectations and comparisons. Amani, though showered with attention, had never accepted a single marriage proposal. He only had eyes for one girl, Nia, the daughter of a powerful village chief. Nia was widely considered the most beautiful woman in all the land. From the time they were children, Nia had visited the palace with her family many times, growing close to both princes. As the years passed, Amani fell deeply in love with her. She was kind, intelligent, and beautiful. Everything a future queen should be. But what no one knew, not even Amani, was that Jabari had also fallen for Nia. Though he kept his feelings secret, his heart burned with a quiet longing every time he saw her. But Jabari knew, or at least he thought he knew, that Nia only had eyes for Amani. After all, who could possibly choose him over his perfect brother? Now the time had come. Nia and her family were set to visit the palace again in a few days. This time, Amani had decided he would finally confess his love to her and ask for her hand in marriage. The kingdom was already buzzing with anticipation, knowing that a royal wedding could soon be on the horizon. But for Jabari, those days leading up to Nia's visit were filled with a deep sadness. He knew his brother loved her, and he knew that soon she would be gone from his life forever, married to the man everyone, including Nia herself, believed was destined for greatness. When Nia and her family arrived, both princes were there to greet them at the palace gates. As soon as she stepped out of her carriage, the entire courtyard seemed to fall silent. Nia had become even more stunning over the years. Her beauty was unmatched, and both brothers felt their breath catch in their throats as they laid eyes on her. Nia smiled widely when she saw Amani and ran to hug him. Jabari watched silently as the two of them embraced, his heart heavy. He felt invisible once again. The night was filled with celebration. Nobles from all over the kingdom had gathered for a grand feast in honor of Nia and her family. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed through the halls. But Jabari felt like a ghost in the middle of it all. Every smile he forced was a mask, and every song played by the musicians seemed like a cruel reminder of his own unspoken love. The next day, Amani finally got his chance to be alone with Nia. They walked together in the palace gardens, away from the eyes of the court. And it was there that Amani decided to confess his feelings. "Nia," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've known you for so long now, and every day I felt my love for you grow stronger. You are the one I want by my side, as my queen. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He looked at her, expecting to see joy in her eyes. But instead, Nia looked conflicted. "Amani," she said softly, her voice hesitant. "You are a wonderful man, and any woman would be lucky to have you as her husband, but I can't marry you. You are like a brother to me, the brother I never had, and I'm also in love with someone else." Amani blinked, confused. What do you mean?" Nia took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to say what she had kept hidden for years. "Amani, the truth is, I'm in love with your brother." Silence filled the garden as Amani stared at her, shocked. His brother? Jabari. Of all the people she could have chosen, she loved Jabari. "I've been in love with him since we were children," Nia continued, her words trembling. "I never had the courage to say anything because I thought he didn't feel the same way. But when I heard him playing music in the woods one day, singing so beautifully, I knew I loved him." Amani was heartbroken, but his kind nature refused to let bitterness take root. He nodded slowly, processing the revelation, and despite the pain, he smiled weakly. I understand," he said, his voice quiet. "If that's how you feel, then I'll respect your decision. I want you to be happy, Nia. I'll talk to Jabari." And so Amani went to his brother that very afternoon. When he told Jabari the news, Jabari could hardly believe it. No one had ever shown interest in him before. Could Nia really love him? When they met privately, Nia confessed her feelings to Jabari. She explained how she had fallen for him when they were young, hearing him sing and play his instrument in the woods. She had been too shy to say anything, waiting all these years for him to notice her. Now, tired of waiting, she had decided to confess her love. Jabari, stunned but overjoyed, told her he loved her too. They decided to get married. The news of their engagement spread quickly throughout the kingdom, and everyone was shocked. Even the king himself was surprised by the turn of events, but he gave his blessing and celebrated the marriage. Amani, ever the supportive brother, smiled through his heartbreak and wished them well. He promised that one day he would find a woman as kind and beautiful as Nia. For the first time in his life, Jabari felt like he had something his brother didn't. And while he was happy, a small part of him still wondered why Nia had chosen him over Amani. The kingdom had barely finished celebrating the marriage of Prince Jabari and Princess Nia when tragedy struck. A mysterious disease swept through the land, claiming lives in every village and town. It didn't discriminate. Rich, poor, old or young, everyone was vulnerable. The kingdom's healers worked day and night to find a cure, but the sickness was relentless. The palace itself wasn't spared from the suffering. The king, the wise and powerful ruler who had guided the kingdom for decades, fell ill. His health deteriorated quickly, and within weeks, the once strong king passed away, leaving his sons and the kingdom in mourning. Prince Amani, the firstborn and rightful heir to the throne, was devastated by the loss of his father. He had always looked up to him, learned from him, and admired his wisdom. Now Amani had to step into the role of king far earlier than anyone had expected. There was no time for grieving. His people needed him. Amani's heart was heavy as he accepted the crown. The weight of responsibility bore down on his shoulders, but he was determined to rule with the same wisdom and compassion his father had shown and lead the kingdom through this dark time. He spent every waking hour at the council chambers, consulting with advisors, healers, and military leaders to find a way to protect his people from both the disease and the uncertainty that came with it. But fate had more challenges in store. As the kingdom struggled to cope with the disease, news arrived from the borders. Another kingdom had decided to strike while they were weak. The neighboring king, known for his ruthlessness, saw the kingdom's vulnerability as an opportunity to conquer new lands. He assembled his army and launched an invasion. Amani, though still grieving and weakened by the loss of his father, knew he had no choice but to act. His kingdom was hanging by a thread, and if they lost this battle, they would lose everything. "Gather the army," Amani ordered his generals. "We must defend our people no matter the cost." Jabari approached Amani, his heart full of determination. "I want to fight alongside you, brother. This is my kingdom too, and I can't just stand by while you risk your life." Amani placed a firm hand on Jabari's shoulder, his eyes filled with both love and concern. "No, Jabari, you are not meant for the battlefield. I know you're not skilled in combat, and I can't bear the thought of losing you out there. I love you more than anything in this world, and I won't risk your life. You have a wife, someone who needs you. You have a future filled with joy and happiness ahead of you, and I want you to protect that. Let me fight. If something happens to me, you must take on the role of king and protect our kingdom. Your time will come, but not today." Jabari hesitated, but he knew Amani's words came from a place of deep love and responsibility. With a heavy heart, he nodded, allowing Amani to take the lead in battle. The palace was buzzing with activity as soldiers prepared for battle. The mood was somber. Everyone knew they were facing impossible odds. Their resources were stretched thin, and many of their soldiers had already succumbed to the disease. But Amani was determined not to let his people fall. He personally led the troops into battle, his bravery inspiring those who followed him. The battle was fierce. Amani, despite his royal status, fought alongside his soldiers, leading charges and defending his kingdom with every ounce of strength he had. The enemy outnumbered them, but Amani's clever military strategies turned the tide. He used the terrain to his advantage, employing guerrilla tactics and surprise attacks that confused the invaders. After days of intense fighting, the tide finally turned in their favor. By some miracle, they won the battle and conquered the enemy kingdom. But the victory came at a heavy price. Amani had been gravely injured during the fighting. The royal healers worked tirelessly to save him, but his wounds were severe. For weeks, Amani fought for his life, and the people of the kingdom prayed for their beloved king. But their prayers went unanswered. After weeks of suffering, King Amani, the firstborn prince who had done everything in his power to protect his people, passed away. The kingdom mourned yet again, this time for the loss of a leader who had done everything in his power to save them. He had never married, and with no children to inherit the throne, the crown now passed to the only remaining prince, Jabari. Jabari, the prince who had always been in the background, was now king. He had not been destined for this role, but fate had placed it in his hands. With Nia by his side, he was now the ruler of not just one, but 2 kingdoms. At first, King Jabari ruled with dignity. The disease that had devastated the kingdom was now gone, and under his rule, peace and prosperity returned. He was now the most powerful king of the continent, something his younger self could have never dreamed of. Nia was a supportive queen, always by his side, offering counsel and comfort when he needed it. She had loved him for so long, even before the crown, and her devotion never changed. The people who once dismissed Jabari began to respect him. But deep down, Jabari couldn't forget that he had always been the second choice, the prince who was never supposed to be king. The shadow of his brother's legacy loomed large, and, though no one said it outright, He knew people still whispered Amani's name with reverence. As time went on, something began to change in Jabari. The power he held over not just one, but 2 kingdoms started to intoxicate him. His decisions became more self-serving. He surrounded himself with advisors who told him only what he wanted to hear. His once humble nature gave way to arrogance. The prince who had once longed for recognition now demanded it, expecting his subjects to bow before him with reverence and punishing those who didn't. At first, the changes were subtle. He became less patient with the court, snapping at servants and lashing out at ministers who questioned his decisions. The people noticed, but they hoped it was just the pressure of the crown. But, as the months passed, Jabari's cruelty grew more evident. He began to levy heavy taxes on the people, hoarding wealth for himself while the common folk struggled. But the worst of it fell on Nia. The woman who had stood by his side through everything, comforted him when he lost his family, was now the target of his cruelty. Jabari cared little for Nia's feelings. Whenever she tried to speak to him, to remind him of the love they once shared, he brushed her aside. The pain of his neglect and betrayal weighed heavily on her heart. As the months passed, Nia's sadness deepened. She stopped eating properly and always looked exhausted. Her heart was broken, and it showed in her appearance. Jabari, blinded by his own arrogance, blamed her for her changed looks, calling her unattractive and unworthy. One day, Nia decided to speak to him in private, gently reminding him of the man he used to be. "Jabari, please. You've changed. You're not the same man I fell in love with." Jabari dismissed her concerns. "I'm the king, Nia. I have responsibilities you wouldn't understand." "I understand more than you think," Nia replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've been by your side since the beginning, but this isn't the man I married. You're hurting people, Jabari. You are hurting me." But Jabari didn't want to hear it. His arrogance blinded him to the truth. "Enough, Nia. You're just jealous because you are no longer beautiful. Perhaps if you weren't that ugly, you wouldn't feel so neglected." Nia jumped back like she got hit. To hear Jabari, the man she loved, speak to her with such cruelty broke her heart. That night, she cried herself to sleep, remembering those words and regretting her marriage. As Jabari's cruelty deepened, he began taking mistresses, flaunting them in front of the court and humiliating Nia. She was no longer the radiant queen she had once been, and Jabari treated her as though she were disposable. He neglected her, refused to acknowledge her pain, and eventually, he made the cruelest decision of all. He divorced her. The court whispered about her downfall, how the once beautiful queen had been replaced by a younger, more stunning woman. Nia's heart shattered, and she left the palace, returning to her father's village, with nothing but the memories of the love she had lost. When Nia returned to her father's village, heartbroken and humiliated after her divorce, her father was devastated by the news. He had always known that his daughter's love for Jabari was deep and pure, and to see her cast aside like this was too much for him to bear. Her father, Chief Mwansa, had been a respected leader for decades, but this was not a matter of politics. This was personal. Fueled by rage and paternal love, Chief Mwansa decided to confront the king. He traveled to the palace, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and dread. When he arrived, the guards at the palace gate were hesitant to let him through, but Mwansa was not just any man. He was a chief, and they couldn't refuse him entry. When he was finally granted an audience with King Jabari, he approached the throne room with his head held high, his eyes blazing with anger. There, seated on his lavish throne, was Jabari, now a different man from the one Mwansa had once welcomed into his home as a son-in-law. Beside Jabari was his new queen, her lips curled in a smirk, watching the scene unfold with a cruel amusement. Chief Mwansa's voice shook with fury as he spoke. "King Jabari, you've humiliated my daughter. You made a vow to her, a vow to love her and protect her, and you have shattered that promise. You've discarded her like she was nothing. Jabari, lounging on his throne, barely lifted his head to acknowledge the chief's words. Your daughter no longer pleases me. She's lost her beauty. And what use is a queen who no longer commands attention? Mwansa clenched his fists. She lost her beauty because of you. You broke her heart, treated her like dirt, and now you dare to speak of her like she's worthless? You've destroyed her spirit. Jabari's expression hardened. What do you want, old man? I want you to restore her honor. I want you to make things right, Mwansa demanded, his voice rising with each word. Jabari sneered, his arrogance fully on display. Make things right. You come into my palace, speaking to me like this. You forget, Chief Mwansa, that I am no longer the second prince hiding in the shadows. I am the king of 2 kingdoms. I owe you nothing. Chief Mwansa's face flushed with anger. You've let this power go to your head. You think being king means you can do whatever you want. But remember this, Jabari. You were never meant to be king. You've taken this crown, but you've lost yourself in the process. You better change or you will regret it. Jabari stood from his throne. Regret? Regret? You dare speak to me of regret? He motioned to the guards. Take him away. Before Chief Mwansa could react, the guards seized him and Jabari said, Throw him in the dungeons. When Nia heard the news that her father had been thrown in jail, her world crumbled even further. Her father was everything to her. The man who had raised her, loved her, and guided her through life. And now he was rotting in a dungeon because of the man she had once loved with all her heart. To make matters worse, her mother had fallen gravely ill, her health deteriorating rapidly from the grief of losing her husband to imprisonment. Nia knew what she had to do, no matter how much it pained her. She gathered her strength and made the long, lonely journey back to the palace. Her heart raced as she walked through the gates, past the guards who had once bowed to her as their queen. Now they barely acknowledged her presence. When she entered the throne room, she saw Jabari seated beside his new wife, looking as arrogant as ever. The sight of them together made her stomach turn. With tears streaming down her face, Nia dropped to her knees before Jabari. Her voice broke as she begged, Please, please, Jabari. My father is all I have left. My mother is sick, and I fear she won't survive if my father remains in prison. I beg you, release him. Don't punish him for loving me. He's done nothing wrong. Jabari stared down at her. Nia's heart ached as she continued, her words desperate and raw. We were once in love, Jabari. You were once a kind man, a man who cared for others. Please, if there's any part of that man left inside you, have mercy. Don't let my father die in your dungeons. He's an old man, and he doesn't have much time. Please. But instead of softening, Jabari's face twisted into a cruel smile. Glanced at his new wife, who smirked back at him as though they were sharing some private joke. You think I should show mercy? Jabari said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You think I owe you or your father anything after the way you've disrespected me? Nia shook her head, her sobs becoming louder. I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for my father. He is a good man. He doesn't deserve to die in a dungeon because of your hatred for me. Jabari stood from his throne. Looming over her, she knelt at his feet. Hatred? Oh, Nia, I don't hate you. I simply don't care about you anymore. You are nothing to me now. The words hit Nia like a dagger to the heart. Nia stood, her face wet with tears, but something inside her had changed. No longer was she the heartbroken woman who had been cast aside. Now, she was filled with rage. Before the entire court, she pointed at Jabari, her voice trembling with fury. You are no king, she said, her voice low but filled with power. You're a tyrant, Jabari. You've let this crown destroy you, and you've destroyed everything good in yourself in the process. Jabari raised an eyebrow, amused. Is that so? Yes, Nia said firmly. And one day, you will fall. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but mark my words, you will fall. And when that day comes, no one will mourn for you. The room was silent. Everyone in the court had stopped what they were doing, watching the confrontation in stunned silence. Even Jabari's new wife shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her smirk disappeared slowly. Jabari's expression darkened. "Leave now, Nia, before I throw you in the dungeon beside your father." Nia turned to leave, but paused at the door, looking over her shoulder one last time. "I'll leave, Jabari. But know this. You may have 2 kingdoms now, but you have nothing worth holding on to. You are hurting everyone around you. And mark my words, I will make sure you pay for what you've done." The room fell silent as Nia stormed out, her words hanging in the air. And as she left, one thing became clear. Jabari had made a powerful enemy, one who knew his every weakness.
Hi cutie pies, this is Zakia. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and prepare for the big storm coming in part 2.